Welcome to the University of South Florida. Housing and Residential Education is so excited to welcome you to campus. Living on campus is the only way to get the full USF experience. We strive to provide ample options to accommodate the needs of each student. We offer traditional, suite, and apartment-style floor plans. Let's check out each style. Traditional style is what usually comes to mind when people think about college housing. Students will share a bedroom with a single roommate and then a bathroom with the rest of the floor. Traditional style living offers the most potential for interaction with other residents. We especially recommend this style for first-year students. Suite style offers more privacy than traditional style, while still offering plenty of potential for interaction with other residents. Apartment-style living offers the most independence. In this style, we offer private and double occupancy bedrooms, a kitchen with a full-size refrigerator and oven, and a furnished living room. Apartment style provides the privacy of independent living combined with the comforts of home. What every hall option has in common is that our student residents have the convenient access to the classroom buildings, the library, and all of USF amenities, including the Campus Recreation Center, Marshall Student Center, the on-campus Publix, Starbucks, dining halls, and more. Those living on campus also have access to the residential learning program led by a residential education team. This program provides tools, resources, and opportunities to our student residents to help them navigate their time at the university and position themselves for success. This proximity to classrooms and amenities combined with the residential learning program results in a much higher likelihood that on-campus residents will perform better academically and graduate at higher rates than those who live elsewhere. We are dedicated to creating safe and welcoming residential communities that promote student success. We hope to see you living the Bull's life with us at USF. For more information, visit our website at usf.edu/housing. On our website, you can explore different hall options, complete the housing application steps, and select your future hall.
Coming to you from the beautiful University of South Florida campus in Tampa, it's USF Housing Live!
Welcome to USF Housing Live. I'm your host, Julia O'Hara, with Housing and Residential Education at the beautiful University of South Florida in Tampa. Thank you for joining us this evening as we talk with New Student Connections and the Office of Financial Aid at USF. First this evening, we'll be speaking with New Student Connections, and later on in the show, we'll be joined by Financial Aid. Be sure to drop your questions in the comments wherever you're watching, and we'll respond to as many as we can throughout the show. So our first guest this evening is Rick Garcia, coordinator with New Student Connections. Welcome, Rick. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
So we have some questions for you, and then, like I said, we're going to take any questions that the audience may have. So are you ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
All right. So to start, let's start with your role at New Student Connections.
Yes, so I am a coordinator here in New Student Connections. My name is Rick Garcia. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I work very closely with many of our student leaders who are our boots on the ground, connecting with students and supporting them in their transition.
So what is New Student Connections? What's the mission of New Student Connections, and what do you all do?
Yes, the way we like to package where New Student Connections fits into the puzzle of a student's experience is that during your first summer, when you're getting started, getting registered, orientation is the premier office that is there to help you to get you registered at your orientation session. And then once week of welcome, or the first week of your first semester begins, that is where New Student Connections comes alongside them and starts supporting you in your transition, and the baton kind of gets passed to us. So our mission is to connect with students and family members to provide access to knowledge and resources, to make you feel valued, seen, cared for, and to give you some friendly faces who are here to make USF feel that much smaller and that much more manageable, so that you know this is a place that you can thrive, a place you can grow, and a place you can learn.
Thank you. And so you all do many different things, and one of those is peer coaching. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course. So, as I mentioned before, we have some wonderful student leaders that work in our office. They are called peer advisor leaders, or PALs, and we name them as such because hopefully they'll be your pal during your transition, there to help you. So, peer coaching is the program that those student leaders put on where they're available to connect with students on a one-on-one basis to get to know a student, kind of assess where their experience is thus far, the good, the bad, and the ugly, to really come alongside them and not only help them solve issues and resolve, bumps in the road that they may be experiencing during their transition, but also helping them get connected to friends and resources on campus, also that they can set goals and come up with plans to achieve those goals that will make their first year better and therefore make their entire USF experience better.
Great. And you talked a little bit about this and just the different ways that New Student Connections helps, but what are some different reasons that a student should engage with New Student Connections, even if they're feeling like maybe it's not something that they need?
Yes, great question. Oftentimes we like to say that a student doesn't know what they don't know, right? And that is why every student can benefit from getting connected and engaging with us here at New Student Connections, because we are not just the resource for a student that's having trouble, for a student that is hitting those bumps in the road. We are just as much a resource for a student that feels like their experience is going very well so far. We would love to come alongside that student and help them come up with goals and get them better connected to campus to make that experience even better. So really every student, regardless of where they're at in their transition, could stand to benefit from getting involved and engaging with New Student Connections, because we really do provide customizable services for everyone and by their peers.
Mm-hmm. So you made a good point of someone that feels like their experience is going really well, that they maybe don't need those connections as much, that it could still be a benefit for them. And then what are ways that New Student Connections can help a student who might be having a hard time getting connected on campus?
Yes. That can be such a loaded topic depending on what experiences, expectations, hopes, dreams that a student is coming into their college experience with. And that is why New Student Connections is so helpful for a student who is having trouble getting connected, because we really take the time to get to know an individual. They're not just a number on a list for us. They're not just a name on a list. They are a full holistic person that we want to get to know, that we want to help, and that we want to carve a custom path alongside them for their experience, or at least for their first year, and hope that that will snowball and make it an even better USF experience in the long run. So we really do break USF down into some bite-sized, manageable, digestible pieces, make the place feel smaller, and help a student figure out where it is that they need to go, or even figure out the right questions to ask to then identify where some of those gaps are, because a student oftentimes is so overwhelmed during their transition. If they are having any kind of trouble, they might not even know where to begin. So that is why a peer advisor leader will come and ask them all the right questions and guide that conversation and just get to know them. And then the peer advisor leader brings in their existing campus knowledge that we trained them with about all of the different opportunities and resources, and brings it right to the student to make it easy and accessible for them.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Rick, especially since USF is such a large university, but it does have so many opportunities to help students really feel connected and make it feel a little bit smaller. And New Student Connections being there to help throughout that process is so nice for students to have that opportunity. So in addition to everything you're saying about the resources offered, we're excited to have events and programs start coming back a little bit more prominently here at USF. So what are some events and programs that New Student Connections sponsors throughout this year that incoming students can look forward to?
Yes, great question. We really do put on events that really appeal to students with a variety of preferences, whether you're the type of student who likes a large-scale event with a bunch of people at it and you just want to be a social butterfly, boy, do we have events for you. Or are you more of an introverted student who wants to engage a bit more one-on-one or in smaller groups to learn more about campus and how you fit into that puzzle? We have events for that scale and everything in between. And where that really comes into play primarily is Week of Welcome, as I mentioned before, which is during the first week of every semester. New Student Connections puts on a variety of events, and a lot of our campus partners, such as the great folks over at Housing and Residential Education, come alongside us as well and put on even more events to not only help you meet people, but also to help you figure out how to navigate campus, identify where your classes are, identify who on campus is here to help you, and so much more. So Week of Welcome really is the best way for a new student to kick off their new experience and start off that first year, that first semester on the right foot and on solid ground, because it really does provide such a variety of opportunities for you to get what you need during that first week. Even if when you show up you don't know what it is that you need, we make it hopefully digestible and provide a nice calendar of events so you can really pick and choose, carve your own path, and customize that first initial experience. And then beyond Week of Welcome, we also put on our How to College virtual chats, accessible on our Instagram and on our YouTube page, where we take a variety of topics such as study skills, financial aid, and so much more. We'll bring a campus partner in with us for that virtual chat, and we will bring the campus expertise and those resources and knowledge to the student so that they don't have to go off and find them wherever they might be. So it makes it digestible, makes it easy to access, and we provide a Q&A opportunity for students to ask campus experts and current students any of their burning questions so that they can really get what they need and get the information they need to be successful.
And Rick, the Week of Welcome and the chats that you just mentioned, where can students and family members go to find information on these? Is that going to be on your website? Do you have a list of events there?
Yes, our website, newstudent.usf.edu, is a great resource, as well as our Instagram, USF_NSC. That is a great social media platform. If social media is your speed, we keep it very much updated, and we also check our messages on there very frequently. So we're also happy to answer any questions on there about our services or even other services, and we're happy to serve as that liaison to get you answers and get you connected.
Perfect. And one thing I did want to ask your opinion on before we ended tonight. The Week of Welcome you mentioned is a great opportunity for students to get involved and learn more about the experience at USF, even if they're not sure if they need to go. It's such an advantage to get involved and learn about these opportunities early on in your experience, rather than, your first semester is going to go by quick. And rather than waiting until November to realize that, there are so many resources and benefits involved in the student experience that you didn't know about. So do you have some advice on getting involved early or being involved in Week of Welcome that you would provide to incoming students?
Yes, I think first, as far as some philosophical advice, my advice is to push yourself out of your comfort zone. If engaging in these Week of Welcome events doesn't feel like the right fit for you, at least give one a try. Maybe see what we're posting about on social media and find one that feels like the right scale or the right vibe or feeling for you, and try at least one and push yourself out of your comfort zone a bit to make some of those initial connections, or at least learn a little bit more about this place that you'll hopefully make your home for 4-ish years. Then as far as making it a bit more manageable, in addition to those platforms I mentioned earlier where you can learn more, Bulls Connect, it really is going to be a student's best friend in navigating not just Week of Welcome, but their entire USF experience, because USF departments, student organizations are constantly updating that with information, events that you can partake in, services that they offer. So it really is a nice one-stop shop to figure out and get a lay of the land at USF. And we do post everything for Week of Welcome on there as well. So it'll help you navigate Week of Welcome if nothing else. But it's a great place to navigate and sift through the many opportunities, like you mentioned, and the many organizations that there are at USF. It's a way to make them feel a little bit more manageable and to maybe find some that might be a good fit for you. We recommend finding one based on your career interests, find one based off of mutual interests with hopeful friends, and then one that sounds like just fun. And that's a great way to explore at least 3 opportunities on campus to get yourself started and maybe make some initial connections during your first semester.
That's great. And Rick, you mentioned Bulls Connect. So for those that are new with us or may not have been to orientation yet, can you give a little summary of what that is?
Of course. So Bulls Connect is our student organization platform. As I mentioned before, there's also USF departments on there. So lots of USF organizations in general are on this platform, but its primary use is student organizations because they are constantly posting their events, their updates, and it's where you can literally join a student organization, get in contact with them, get all that great information, and hopefully find some community there. So it brings it all into one place. You can sift through it via categories. There's also an event calendar. So if you don't know what organization you want to join, the event calendar is a great place to start because you can just see what's going on and what you have to pick from. And from there, you can kind of, as I said earlier, carve that path for yourself.
Perfect. All right, Rick, thank you so much. And before we end tonight, can you let us know, the viewers that are watching, if a student or family member has questions for your department, how they would contact you all?
Yes. Our email is newstudent@usf.edu, very similar to our website. And as I mentioned before, you're also welcome to message us on our Instagram page at USF_NSC, and we're happy to answer questions on either of those.
Great. Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time tonight, and have a great night. We'll talk to you next time.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, thanks again, Rick, for taking the time to chat. And it's time for us to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more USF Housing Live right after this.
Hi, my name's Nur.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is Looking Back with USF Housing.
Come join us as we ask students about their first time at USF.
Let's take a look.
So, what is your name and major?
My name is Iman, and my major is International Studies.
Awesome. So, Iman, why did you choose USF?
Well, I got the most financial aid from it, and it turned out to be the best investment financially and depending on location of where I wanted to be too.
Okay, yeah. And now that you're here, what's your favorite thing about USF?
Honestly, I love the campus. I love how green it is. I visit other universities sometimes, and I just always come back to having USF as my favorite.
Awesome. And you did mention that you lived on campus. What is the benefit that you see to it?
I feel like it's a lot easier to connect with other people socially when you live on campus because it's not like you have to go home or you just feel more connected to things that go on campus.
Yeah. And now, what advice would you give for incoming students?
I would say that half the things that you think you need, you do not need. So don't overpack for your dorm.
That's true. Thank you so much, Iman. Have a good one. Bye.
Okay, so what is your name and major?
My name is Bucci Douglas, and I'm a computer science major.
Okay. And so now that you're here, what's your favorite thing about USF?
Oh, my favorite thing? I think just hanging out with all my friends, making all the friends through all the organizations and everything. Just all the events that we can just go to on campus and all the stuff around campus, going out, nothing is really too far. And if you need to go somewhere, it's just a walk or it's already on campus, yeah.
Agreed. So what do you think are some of the best ways to make friends on campus?
Going to student organization events, since I'm computer science, I go to NSBE, which is the National Society of Black Engineers, or SHEP, which is the Society of Hispanic and Professional Engineers. I'm also part of Theta Tau, which is the engineering fraternity, and I feel like all of them together have been the best way just to really make a community essentially that I can be a part of, and just meet new people.
Yeah, that's great. And then finally, what advice do you have for incoming students?
Don't be afraid to go to events and don't be afraid to talk to people. It's everybody has gone through that, not knowing anybody, being the new kid essentially, and just going to college is another experience like that. So I feel like if you go to these events, find organizations that you like or you're interested in, go there, talk to people, and people will be really open to talk and be friends with you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Welcome back. I'm Julia O'Hara, and if you're just now joining us, this is USF Housing Live, and we're here to help prepare you to live the Bulls life at USF. Ask us your questions in the comments, and we'll answer live on the show. Our second guest this evening is the Program Director of the Office of Financial Aid at USF, Damian Lovett. Hi, Damian. How are you?
I'm fine, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us again. We're excited to ask you all of our questions that we have prepared, and then we already have some from the audience regarding financial aid. I know that's a hot topic, so I appreciate your time with us this evening.
You're welcome.
So let's dive in. Before we do, though, can you introduce yourself and tell the folks what you do at USF?
Yes, I am Damian Lovett, Program Director here in the Office of Financial Aid, and I'm responsible pretty much for mostly all things financial aid related, as well as conducting various outreach sessions for students and families that are seeking to receive information about financial aid. And I have been here for 25 years.
Wow, I didn't know that. Congratulations, Damien.
Thank you.
So, what is the best way for a student or a family member to get personalized assistance regarding their financial aid?
Yes, so as you can imagine, there's a great amount of detail that goes into financial aid. It's a very complex and bureaucratic process, and as such, individuals will have a lot of questions about how financial aid works. Um, so the best way for students and families to reach us is by visiting the office in person, and we have offices on each USF campus. In addition to that, the other way is to call us by phone. And if you do call us by phone, just a word of warning, you may have a extended wait time because we have a lot of individuals that call us it's more convenient than coming to the office or if they're not local. But those are the two primary ways to reach us here.
Yeah, I can imagine that each individual has different types of questions that are very specific to their situation. So,
Correct.
I have some kind of broader questions or more frequently asked questions for you. And then if we have any questions that come in from the audience, we'll do our best to try to answer those in a general type of way as well. So a question that we get a lot is, when is the bill for fall semester due?
So the typical rule of thumb is that the bill is due at the end of the first week of classes every semester that the student is enrolled. Here at the university, a couple of ways that we help with that is to provide students with what we call a tuition and fee deferment. And basically what that means is if the student's receiving any type of financial aid, so grants, loans, scholarships, then we will extend the payment due date for students so that they can use their financial aid first. And if it's not enough to pay for their USF bill in its entirety, then they have additional time to come up with the additional funds if they need to. So for the fall semester, for students that are not receiving financial aid or paying their own way, the bill is due on August the 26th. If the student's receiving financial aid and they have an extended payment period through the deferment, then the payment then becomes due on October 7th. One caveat to that is that if the student is staying in on-campus housing and also has a meal plan, then that October 7th date is honored for payment due dates for both the housing and meals.
Got it. And a question that is up this vein here with financial aid from Courtney is, a student's summer B with bill deferment is July 15th, and then there's a financial aid hold on their final transcript, but the transcript isn't available until July 14th. Do we pay summer B up front, then get refunded for Bright Futures and FAFSA following that? Or would this be an individualized question for your office?
That it's general enough. So the first thing would be is, of course, if you do have the resources to pay the bill ahead of time, go ahead and do that. And yes, anything that is available from financial aid after receipt of those transcripts and they have been processed, then the student will be refunded those funds. And that refund does go directly back to the student. So if you are the parent or family member that's paying on behalf of your student, it is up to the two of you to make that negotiation because the student will receive those funds back. It will not come back to the individual that paid the bill.
And you mentioned this a little bit, but just clarifying, is financial aid applied or awarded before the tuition deadline?
So I didn't go too far into detail, but I'll clarify. So the bill is due at the end of the first week, so that's always going to be on a Friday, unless the holiday falls on that day. But as far as the financial aid being released, that officially occurs on Sunday of the first week of classes, so 7 days into the term. And so that is the reason why we provide students with the tuition fee deferments, because if we did not do that, then the payment would be considered late and the student would be canceled from their classes for non-payment. So since if students have financial aid, then we will tell the Student Financial Services Office that the student has money coming to help pay their bill and to leave them in their classes. And then once the financial aid is applied, then everything starts to process accordingly. And if the student does not owe any additional money and the financial aid is in excess of their bill, then the student receives a refund. Otherwise, they would have the additional time to pay the remaining balance due on the bill.
Got it. Thank you. And Melina was asking earlier in the broadcast before we had you on that her daughter is going to be living off campus, and she's wondering how she can apply money from financial aid and her loan to pay for that apartment. How does that work on the back end?
Sure, great question. So as a part of financial aid and the financial aid awarding process, we will provide each student with what we call a cost of attendance. And that is basically the students' tuition fees, their housing and their food, books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. So we put all of those figures together to come up with that cost of attendance number. And then once the student receives their financial aid allocation, if the university's bill has been paid in full, then once again, the student will receive a refund back, which they can then use for their other educational expenses, such as housing and food, even if they are living off campus. And so once that occurs, the student will receive that refund back during the second week of the term. And then it is their responsibility to then take that money and allocate it to be used throughout the rest of the semester to pay for their rent or whatever else they need to have those additional funds for.
Got it. Thank you. And moving to Florida Prepaid and Bright Futures, when will students see if their Florida Prepaid or Bright Futures is connected and applied in their account?
Yeah, so I'll do this in two ways. I'll address Florida Bright Futures first, because Florida Bright Futures is administered by the Office of Financial Aid, and that particular source of funding is a scholarship, and those funds will be available for students and applied to their bill at the end of the first week of classes, along with the rest of the financial aid. The Florida Prepaid is administered by Student Financial Services, which is a separate office from financial aid. And Student Financial Services is responsible for the overall student bill that they owe to the university. So once the financial aid is applied, then about 2 to 3 weeks into the term is when the Florida Prepaid will be received from the state office in Tallahassee. So there will always be a little gap there, which is another reason why we provide students with the tuition fee deferments, because if your financial aid is not enough to pay for the university bill by itself, and the Florida Prepaid would be enough to cover anything that's left, then you still have that additional time. And so our advice to students and families is always is to wait until everything has been applied, especially if you have Florida Prepaid, because there is that 2 to 3 week delay into the semester. And you also, since you will have another 4 weeks after that, there's still plenty of time. And so that's pretty much how that is handled. In the case of both the Florida Bright Futures and Florida Prepaid, the way that those are sent to us, because they both come from Tallahassee, is through the system that we use. But the main part is that they both require that the student's social security number is in the files correctly. Okay, so that's really the main thing that can cause some students a little bit of trouble, is if that number is not correct, then it will cause an additional delay until that's resolved.
And my next question that I have prepared for you, I'm going to kind of tag on another question that I'm getting from an audience member. So my next question is there an account through which family members can access the student's financial information And then we have a question from the audience asking, is there anything to consider about financial aid when the student is a minor? So I'm assuming that this might tie into this question a little bit.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So here at the University of South Florida, there is not a parent portal for families to access to receive information about their students' finances or their academics. Some schools do have this as an option, but here at USF we do not. So the only way for families to get that information is through their student, because the OASIS system is what we use here to provide information to students, whether it be for their grades or registration for classes, their student bill, and financial aid. So that is the main way for students to get into the account, but they have to share that information with their family members should they have that agreement to do so, because the information within that system is considered private. Which comes to the second part of the question, is that once the student becomes a student at the university, there are federal confidentiality laws that then become active, that go into effect. And one of those, especially for financial aid, is that we cannot provide financial aid information to third parties without the student's written consent. So, and that includes parents. So what our process is here in the Office of Financial Aid is if the student authorizes us to release that information, then what we will do is we will post a document inside of the OASIS system for the student to complete, and it's the financial aid privacy release form. And once a student completes that form, then they would be letting us know who those parents are that are on their FAFSA and that they authorize us to release information to. The second part of that is that any financial aid that is affected by the student's academic performance, then that becomes an issue that there is disclosures must be on file with the Office of the Registrar that oversees the Family Educational Rights to Privacy Act, which is the overarching confidentiality process for the university records. And so if that is the case, then students would have to complete that particular document with the Office of the Registrar and our privacy form, which are completely separate. So for students that have received financial aid offers from us, we have sent that information to your student. And if you are the parent that is listed on the FAFSA, then you would have also received an email from us with that information in it. So I know that's quite a bit, but we have to maintain the law, because that's what it is for us to be able to administer financial aid. So we are going to protect that information very carefully because we're required to by law.
And Damien, just to make sure I understand, even if the student is a minor, all of this confidentiality laws apply to them as well?
That is correct. If a student is a minor, once they become, as long as they are over the age of 13, once they become a student at the university, then they can sign into any official agreements financially without any consent or co-signing of a parent. They are considered of age for educational purposes. Might not be for other aspects of life, but once they are a college student, then they are considered an adult for that purpose.
Got it. And you touched on this, and I'm going to jump to this question that I had saved for later. What happens to a student's tuition payment if they withdraw from a class?
Yes, so if a student withdraws from a class, there are going to be financial implications. It just is going to depend on a couple of things. One, the timing. So when did the student withdraw from the class, or they withdraw from one course? Did they withdraw from multiple courses? So there's a variety of different aspects that will come into play. So there could be, and I'll give this example. If the student is a Florida Bright Futures recipient, one of the requirements by state law for students receiving these funds is if you withdraw from a class, then the funds that were used from Bright Futures to help pay for that course, you would have to repay those in order to continue with the scholarship and have the opportunity to renew for the next year. So that's just one example. Most of the aid programs have their own requirements, and withdrawal comes into play at various points of the semester. So if the student withdraws from a course or multiple courses, then it may not have a direct impact immediately, unless it's Bright Futures and a couple of other programs, but it could also have an effect on the longer term finances for the student, because we're required to also keep track of how the student is progressing through their education. So for instance, if a student is taking a full course load, which is 12 credit hours a semester, and they end up withdrawing from 2 courses, then they're only completing 50% of the courses, and we're providing them with 100% of the funds for those courses. There is another federal requirement that oversees that, which we have to monitor as well. So if the student is continuously doing that, then they're going to exhaust their eligibility for financial aid, and they won't have that as any aid as a resource to them unless they have scholarships. But at the same time, they could have issues with GPAs or just not completing the courses that they've registered for. So it's a very delicate and complex issue if the student is withdrawn from classes. So the real resource that I would have to give you is that we have information on our website, in our Know This section of our website, that talks about withdrawing from a class or completely withdrawing from classes, as well as dropping classes. So we always advise students to take a look at that, but we also will have that information as a part of the student's financial aid terms and conditions, which they have to accept, which goes over a lot of that. And they have to accept it every year they receive financial aid, so that they are aware of what those conditions are that are attached to each one of the financial aid programs that they're going to be receiving.
Good. That's great that it's on the website and part of the term. So if that's something they want to review, even before choosing a class, it's there for them to take a look at. And a question from Rents earlier in the broadcast: when will the MPNs for summer term be posted to the student's account?
You said MPNs?
MPN.
Okay. And that's an interesting question. I would need a little more context, but the MPN, and this is the only acronym that I know, is the Master Promissory Note that is required for students receiving student loans. And if this is what that is referring to, those are all completed with the federal government on the Federal Student Aid website. So there isn't anything actually posted for that, or everything is done with the federal government. So all of that information is transferred back to us from the federal government, saying that the student has completed that Master Promissory Note, as well as parents who are borrowing parent loans on behalf of their students have to do one for themselves. So all of that is maintained with the federal government. We are the end process holder of that. So we're not at the start of that process.
Got it. Wasn't sure if that was a common acronym that you hear often, so I just threw it out there in case I was the one that just didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
But that sounds probably what they're talking about. So if a student is being awarded from another organization, can they use that fund toward USF? And how do we know if USF has received the external organization's check or wire or whatever that looks like?
Yeah, so typically the students that are receiving funds from outside of the university, they can come in many different types, which can all be used toward their education. The main one are scholarships. So if students are receiving scholarships from their Hometown Elks Club or Kiwanis Club or any other organization, those funds can be sent to the university and applied toward their outstanding bill. So the easiest way to know if those have been received are two ways. One is to check the financial aid award offer that was sent to the student. But that is pretty much a static email that was sent, so it was only good on that particular day that it was sent. The other way is actually by logging into Oasis and reviewing the financial aid award information. If the student does not see that there, because every organization handles this differently. Sometimes those organizations will send that information to us and we can account for it. Sometimes they will rely on the student to do that. So if the student does not see that, whatever that source of funding is in Oasis, then once they log in, we have what we call inside of Oasis under the My Award and Loan Information section of financial aid, we have a tab called Additional Resources that the student can go into that tab and actually enter that information into Oasis, and it will send it back to us. Also on that particular page in Oasis is the mailing address for those organizations to send those payments to the university. So the students can always access it that way. And if they have any other type of funding, it's all done the same way. So all of those payments that are coming from outside the university are then processed by the Student Financial Services Office, who then tells us that they have received it. And we will then apply it toward that student's outstanding bill once the payment release date comes at the end of the first week of classes.
So within Oasis, the portal that you're talking about to go in and look at the account, what are the different kinds of loans that a student can accept through Oasis?
Yes, so there are 3 different types of loans that the student can accept. Actually 4. The student can accept the federal direct unsubsidized loans, federal direct subsidized loans, institutional loans, which we call a USF loan. And if the parent has been offered a parent loan, then the student can also accept that loan inside of Oasis. And we kind of talked a little bit about the master promissory note requirement that is for the student loans and the parent loan. However, there's also one other requirement that's from the federal government if the student is a first-time borrower, and that's the entrance counseling. That also has to be completed. And the entrance counseling is basically the terms and conditions of the loan. So it's a little tutorial that students have to complete to so that they have the understanding and the knowledge that yes, this is a loan that I'm borrowing and that I have to pay it back over time with interest. And in addition to that, we also had the promissory note that we did talk about earlier. Those are the 2 requirements that have to be done that are required by the federal government. And then the third thing for us is accepting the loan in Oasis. But once the student is inside of Oasis, they will have a couple of options. They can accept the full amount of the loan because as required by law, we have to provide the student with the most loan offer they are eligible for, or they can reduce it. So if they know exactly how much they need to borrow, they can put down the exact amount. And then the third option is that they can decline it in full.
And the difference between all of these loans, I know that we don't have a ton of time to go into detail of all of the different kinds and what that means, but is there a resource on your website or another department's website that can kind of describe what the differences are?
Yes, we have that information on the financial aid website. So in the easiest way to do it, to find it is just Google USF student loans and the page will come up. And you'll be able to see the different types of loans. And then the student would be able to read what those differences are.
And a follow-up on the MPN question that we did talk about. You may not know about this particular situation, but this audience member was told the system had been down for the school to process the MPN. Do you know if that I don't know how recently that was. This may be a good question to just follow up individually with your office on.
Yes, it would be, because I have not seen anything or heard anything about the system being down. It is a possibility. If it's a federal system, um, they could have taken it down for maintenance, but usually they will have a message out, and then we also will receive notification if and when the systems are taken offline. So for that particular person, yes, they should definitely contact us, and we can look further into that.
Perfect. And so I just have a few follow-up questions that we have talked about, but for audience members that may have joined us after we've already went over these dates. But Doreen is asking when the tuition is posted. When is tuition posted to the student's bill for fall 2022?
Yes, so we did not talk about that, and that
Oh,
is
okay.
we did not. Then that's a great question. Um, so for the fall semester, the tuition fees have not been finalized yet. Typically, that occurs around the end of July, so the last week of July. And then once that does occur, then Student Financial Services Office will then apply all of the tuition charges to every student's bill, and they will send the student an email. And one thing that I also didn't mention is that all of our communication with our students will be sent to the USF email. And so it's always encouraged for students to check that regularly. But once the tuition and fees are posted, then the student will receive an email from Student Financial Services that says your tuition and fees have been assessed for the fall semester. If students are in on-campus housing and have their meal plans, they will likely see those particular charges on their bill already. Okay, so the only thing would be missing would be the tuition and fees.
Great. And if a student has both Bright Futures and Florida Prepaid, when is the difference refunded to the student?
Yes, so just to recap on that, all of the financial aid, including Florida Bright Futures, is released after the end of the first week of classes. So officially on the 7th day, which is a Sunday. Florida Prepaid is applied about 2 to 3 weeks into the term. So there's always going to be a delay in there. So if the student's financial aid, what they're going to be receiving, except for the prepaid, is enough to pay their bill in full, then their bill will be paid out on that Sunday. If the student has received more financial aid than what their bill was, then the student will be refunded, whatever that difference is, during the second week of classes. And then 2 to 3 weeks later, if they are Florida Prepaid recipients, then the Florida Prepaid funds will be also applied. And in the case where the student does not owe any additional money, then the entire amount of the prepaid payment would then be refunded to the student. Otherwise, whatever amount is authorized for the student to be receiving in Florida Prepaid will be applied toward their bill until it's gone, or the student ends up still receiving something as a refund. So it just depends on how much everything costs.
Got it. Thank you. And is there a way for the Latin American and Caribbean scholarship to transfer to apply to the summer term?
And typically, no, there is not. And what I would encourage the students who have that type of funding is to review the letter that they received once they got the funds, and it will give them the specific terms, and typically that is fall and spring semesters. And so if the student has those type of funds, and that is the case, then what will typically happen for the summer, if they choose to take classes, then they will revert back to a non-Florida resident for tuition purposes until that scholarship is able to be reapplied for the upcoming fall semester, which will revert them back to an in-state status. But I definitely would encourage students receiving that type of funding to read that information very carefully. And if they have questions about that, then they can contact the Office of Admissions that provided the scholarship to them.
And a follow-up on that question, are you aware of any scholarships that are available for the summer term?
It is there are very few that are available, especially from the university. Students are always free to go out and go through the scholarship searches on the internet to find some of their own. But within the university, those are extremely rare, outside of Florida Bright Futures, which students can receive for the summer.
And on another topic, Janine is asking, can you discuss how a student can have their bills paid by wire transfer from an international bank?
Yes, so if students are receiving, or international students are using wire transfers to pay their bill, what they will need to do is to go onto the Student Financial Services website, because the billing payments through the third party and wire transfers are handled by their office, and they can find that information on their website. And it's very easy. If you just do the same thing, you just Google USF tuition and tuition payment, and then it will take you to their website, and you will be able to find that information. Because I'm not sure if you have to provide any information up front, but the process is laid out on their website.
And Shannon is asking, when a student accepts a student loan, does the loan go directly to the school, or is there any process in between that the student needs to take care of?
Yeah, so the way that the student loans work is, once the student has accepted the loan and completed the entrance counseling and the master promissory note, then we will send the request for authorization to fund the student back to the federal government. And once they review it and they process it, then they will send the funds directly back to the school. So those do not go to the student under any circumstances. And then we will then apply that toward the student's outstanding bill, along with any other financial aid that they're going to be receiving. And we will go from there. If they are receiving excess, they get a refund. If not, then they will still have something else to pay. And then they may come back to you and ask you for some more money.
And Damien, before we end tonight, I want to thank you again for taking all of the time to answer our questions and the questions from the audience. But you mentioned it in the beginning, but how can students or family members get in contact with someone from your office if they have further questions?
Yes, so students and families can get in contact with our office two ways. First is visit us in person if you're local. We have offices on each one of the USF campuses, so whichever one is closest to you. If you are local, that would be the way that I would advise you to contact us. And the other way is by calling us on the phone. And as you would expect, calling us on the phone, there will be a lot of other people waiting. And as you kind of heard here from us talking just in these few minutes, the conversations and questions can be pretty complex. And so our phone calls do take longer because we're going to answer all of those detailed questions. And so as such, the wait times will be longer. However, if you're local and you can come in, there is rarely a line in the office except for the start of a semester. So if you can get to us that way, then I encourage you to do that.
That's great advice, and also a good point. I remember those lines at my university too, the beginning of this semester, line to go talk to the financial aid office. So if you do have a question or you anticipate needing clarification on something, now is the time to ask those questions and get in contact with you all.
Yes, this is the perfect time.
Mm-hmm. Well, Damien, thank you again for taking the time tonight and all the hard work that you and your staff do daily. I know that you have a lot of questions coming in, especially right now during this busy time. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Glad
all right.
to
Have a great night, Damien. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again to Damien for answering all of our questions and the questions from the audience. If you have additional questions about living on campus at USF, you can reach our office by email at housing@usf.edu or by phone at 813-974-0001. And be sure to join us for our next episode of Housing Live in 2 weeks on Wednesday, June 22nd at 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be speaking with Student Health Services and the Counseling Center at USF. You can watch on our Facebook or YouTube page, the USF Class of 2026 Facebook group, or the USF Parent and Family Engagement Facebook page. USF Housing Live is produced by Housing and Residential Education at the University of South Florida in Tampa. Our motto is best place to live, best place to work, and best place to learn. Thank you to tonight's guests, Rick Garcia and Damian Lovett, for joining me this evening. Thank you to our production crew, to you, our viewers, and of course, there's always just one last thing. Go Bulls. Good night, everyone.